Welcome back to the studio at African Utility Week. I'm Rose Bundock and I'm joined now by Daniel Swanepoel, lead facilitator for the Power and Utilities for training. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Daniel, you're something of an expert of doing business in Africa within the power and utility space. I'd like to ask you how does a company know when the right time is to come into Africa?
Well, I think specifically if we look at within the power and utility sector, the time in Africa is now. As we say, in South Africa we have a word called kenako, which means the time is now. And if we move especially towards West Africa, there's a lot of focus nowadays on energy requirements and the development of the space. Recently in Nigeria, the government has opened up the electricity market completely to the private sector as well, which means private sector can now freely enter the market, partner with government and work on solutions that will actually allow penetration within the electricity world much faster over the next decade.
I'd say people's perception is probably that the business climate in Nigeria is quite tricky. Is that false?
It's absolutely true. Let's not lie on that. Business in Africa is complicated, and I think more so even on the West African side, because they have different rules that they work by. If you look at especially the three main companies, the oil economies, Angola, Ghana, Nigeria, they all operate on different rules even. So it's not that you have a set of rules that are applicable to all these different countries. You really have to explore your specific market, look at what is required, look at how they do business, and then you have to plan carefully before you enter the market with your product or your business idea.
Okay. What would be your advice about finding partners? Would you say that's an essential part, local partners?
In Africa, I would always suggest to any company that wants to enter Africa as a working place, even if it's not a requirement by the government, rather find a local partner. Into the future, you get a much better buy-in from your local population if you have a local partner. Also, when it comes to the proverbial opening of doors in the world of business, if you have a local partner on your side, they often navigate these paths and doors much easier and quicker than you can, because you will always be seen as the outsider. And the reality is, when we come as the outsider, we have our own way of thinking. We come from a background that we're used to, and where we do business in a specific way, and very often very much a developed world European American mindset, where in Africa they operate on a unique set of rules, and we have to first learn how to do business on their level.
Thinking about South Africa first, what are the key things if I'm a smart grid technology company or I make transformers, what are the key things to know about the South African market before trying to set up here?
Well, South Africa as a market is generally quite easy to get into. We have a lot of incentives even from a government side. But when you enter South Africa, you must realize that we have a local content requirement in all companies. You cannot just enter the market with a foreign product or a foreign concept and expect a complete buy-in into the market. And also on the flip side of this, if you think a company like Eskom, for example, who produces our electricity, they are seen as a public enterprise, which means they certainly have to comply with the legislation of a local component, meaning local staff requirements, local procurement requirements. And for that you need a local partner. And you need to ensure that you have a local partner that definitely has the ability to operate within the market space and that have enough experience already. Otherwise, you are certainly setting yourself up for failure.
Just thinking about, say, like smart metering, smart grid technology, what size is the market in South Africa? Can it sustain a large number of foreign companies coming in?
Well, if you look, in terms of smart metering, especially at the moment, I think the scope is opening up quite nicely. If you look, we sit with a population of about between 55 and 57 million people. Arguably, we sit with electricity penetration of about 85%. However, that does not mean that we have any smart metering in place. Yes, to some extent, in the more affluent areas, yes, it is already there. But there's a much stronger focus at the moment, especially from Eskom's side and perspective, to push this. Because when you look at it from a from a risk management perspective, it just makes it a lot easier to manage the flow of energy into the end user. Also, when we look at it, if we allow clients to feed electricity back into the grid, going into the future, which is becoming very much a talk of the town at the moment. Again, on the smart metering side, there's a lot of scope and opportunity to develop a product that can assist us to achieve the successful.
Do you expect the South African electricity market to open up further to, will we see unbundling and privatisation?
It's good that you asked this question today. In fact, just yesterday, Eskom announced finally that they are looking at an option again to privatise up to 30% of the power utility. It is something that came under discussion a few years ago already, possibly about 8 years ago, and then it was shelved for obvious reasons at the time. But I think with our electricity crisis at the moment, with us going through load shedding almost every other day, they realised the need for the private sector to be involved and to engage. Because private sector can just execute these projects much quicker and faster, and they have a different skill set, and they understand management of risk and management of these projects just better.
What other African markets are reaching for energy, specifically reaching maturity, where it now is, well, not maturity, but a good point for companies to come in?
Look, if you look on the East African side, I wouldn't say a new entrant in the market, but a country to watch is Ethiopia at the moment. Ethiopia has set a goal to become a big exporter of electricity within their region on the Eastern African side, to try and export a lot of renewable energy, for that matter, into the neighboring countries. So Ethiopia sits with a lot of hydro potential, they have a lot of water, they are busy constructing a very large hydro project in Ethiopia, and also they have geothermal capacity, and geothermal capacity to the point of generating full-on power plants where they can in fact export the electricity that they don't use in their own country.
I know there's a lot of talk about, again, coming back to Nigeria, and the filling that metering gap. You know, must make manufacturers very excited, but what would be your advice be there if you're trying to pick up tenders in Nigeria?
See, Nigeria is a tricky place to do business, and one should always be cognizant of this, and you must remember this. The challenge in Nigeria is first to find a local partner that is trusted in the market, and as it is in business, we need connections. So you need to find a partner that has definitely built up a record in the industry, that has got enough experience in order to push your products into the market and to support you. And secondly, moving into Africa, always look into the future. So we must plan towards a sustainable business model, which means if you manufacture at the moment elsewhere in the world, maybe in Europe, maybe in America, do not think that it's a sustainable business model to only export into Africa. Because Africa is becoming more and more aware of the fact that we should demand companies to set up manufacturing plants in our own countries. It doesn't mean that you have to manufacture the entire product in the country, but think about how you can design your business plan that a part of the product can be at least assembled within the African country, because then you get a much better buy-in from the local population and the local country, and very often we have a lot of incentives for companies when it comes to tax breaks in the countries.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about funding actually. What kind of assistance you could get.
There's in South Africa, for example, to give you a good idea. In South Africa, we have manufacturing grants at the moment within electricity space even. So if you come up with an energy efficiency product and it leads to cogeneration, so where there's a definite electrical benefit on the other side, you can get up to 25 million rand as a grant from our government.
Right.
And then if you think going with that grant and that level of funding already to a financial institution to attain the additional funding that you would require for your project becomes a lot easier.
And are there many companies taking them up on that offer?
At the moment, there's a fair amount of companies taking them up, but I don't often think that this knowledge is shared openly. So not many companies know about this grant. And this grant can even apply to a foreign company if they partner with a local company in South Africa and they develop a project together.
A lot of companies come to South Africa thinking it will be a springboard into Africa. Is that a correct approach?
That certainly is the correct approach at the moment, yes. Very often in our company as well, we do lots of strategy consulting. We advise companies to actually do exactly that.
Okay.
Rather set up your regional office first in South Africa, since the rules in South Africa are very much aligned to Europe and America. So we do business in a similar way. The legal ways are the same, terminology is the same. And then very often in South Africa you will find the desired skills when it comes to strategic planning that can assist you to plan your strategy for the rest of Africa. And then you can benefit from some of the regional trade treaties as well, where we can gain some benefits and some incentives along the way.
So knowledge is obviously an important part of the sort of preparation process. What's your kind of best advice if a company wants to find out about the market, the size, the value? How should they go about that?
The knowledge is definitely becoming key to success in Africa, and it's always important to use companies that can support you with the knowledge, that can do some of the research for you, companies that are actually active in the market. Even when it comes to training, try and upskill yourself. Try and make sure that you attend training interventions that actually lead towards you understanding the entire value chain of the market much better.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for sharing your advice. That's all from us at African Utility Week. Thank you.